ওয়েবিনারটা স্টার্ট হয়ে গেছে, তারপর করছি। হ্যাঁ, একটু পরে, 1 ঘন্টা পরে। এখন প্রোগ্রামটা স্টার্ট হয়ে গেছে। থ্যাংক ইউ। Are you starting?
Sir, I will be starting shortly. Just waiting for 1-2 minutes, sir.
Okay, no problem. I thought the voice has gone off.
Okay. Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Ankur Lat from Horiba Medical. I welcome you to our live webinar, Horiba Live, Heart to Heart. First of all, let me thank you for taking out your valuable time for our series of webinars. Your support has been our greatest strength. COVID-19 is still creating havoc around the world. And in immediate future, there does not seem to be any respite from it. Cases are increasing every day, and particularly India is having seen brunt of this. And only thing that can help us to tame the disease is by testing. Many countries have succeeded in controlling the pandemic by extensive testing, and South Korea is the leading example. In testing, RT-PCR remains the vital key. It is approved worldwide and has also been recommended by ICMR. Today we will be discussing about RT-PCR in detail and in particular about kits. Market is flooded with many kits and mostly are approved by ICMR, and it creates a lot of confusion. We have discussed RT-PCR in the past too, but kits have not been discussed. I'm sure while selecting a kit, there are a lot of confusion, like which kit to use, which target genes are more important, what is the ideal storage temperature, what is lyophilized, whether we should go for one tube or whether we should go for two tube technology, and there are many other questions pertinent to this kit. Our speaker will not only give insight into the RT-PCR and kits, but he will also discuss in brief about viral transport media and RNA extraction. As we know, if sampling is not proper, result will never be proper. And same goes for RNA extraction. If purification of RNA has not been done properly, then we can't expect a good result. So here I welcome Dr. Colonel Deepak Kumar Mishra. He is Senior Consultant and Professor, Lab Hematology and Molecular Genetics. He is Director at the Department of Laboratory Sciences, Tata Medical Center. He is Vice President of Molecular Pathology Association of India, Adjunct Professor of School of Medical Science and Technology, IIT Kharagpur. He is on Board of Director of International Society of Laboratory Hematology. He chairs Indian Advisory Board for American Society of Clinical Pathology. He is National Convener of Indian MDS Registry, chairs ICMR Task Force Subcommittee on MDS. He is also a member of the Health Subcommittee FICCI. And in the past, he has presided over Indian Association of Pathologists and Microbiologists as President and Honorary Secretary. In the past, he has also been president of Indian Society of Hematology and Transfusion Medicine. Sir, we are privileged to have you on this platform. Over to you, sir.
Very good afternoon to everyone listening to this webinar. At the outset, I must thank Horiba, particularly Mr. Rajiv Gautam, Ankur, and the entire team of Horiba to have organized this webinar. And as you know that in this lockdown condition, this is the only way how we can speak to each other and can discuss and disseminate information. So today I am thankful to Horiba that they have organized this, and the topic is quite interesting, and the topic is titled as SARS virus 2 COVID-19, choosing the right RT-PCR kit, which is possibly has gone a lot of hype, and we will discuss actually the reality, what is on ground. And thanks for the humble introduction. In the next 30 minutes to 40 minutes, I will discuss about the various facets of this virus, its diagnostic modalities, and the different kits that are available currently in the market, little bit about antibodies, and then we'll be open to discussion. As you know that coronavirus is an unsegmented single-stranded RNA virus, which has a genome which ranges from 26 to 32 kilobases in length. It is a single-stranded RNA. There are four genera of coronaviruses: the alpha, beta, gamma, and delta. The beta coronavirus is the COVID-19 that we are discussing. Principally, if you see this slide, principally the alpha and beta are primarily infective in animals, and the gamma and delta in the birds. Lot of controversy has arose whether it has come from animal or has come from birds. So I think the WHO investigating team is going to investigate that. You must be reading news clippings that it has come from pangolins. Some say it has come from bat, and the origin of this is from the wet market in Wuhan. I am not going to go into that controversy, but you will soon be reading large number of articles regarding how it has come to the human-to-human transmission. So coronaviruses actually already were there, and they were causing primarily two diseases. One is the severe acute respiratory syndrome disease. Another one is the Middle Eastern respiratory syndrome. So this SARS coronavirus and MERS coronavirus were already there. And people were investigating these two in severe respiratory illnesses. And in the Middle East, they were being investigated for respiratory illnesses. But it is the novel coronavirus, that is the SARS coronavirus 2, which is, I have described that it is a beta coronavirus, is the seventh member of the coronavirus family to infect humans. These are two, and other than these two, there are four more. And this is the seventh one. And the disease is known as COVID-19, as all of us know. And if you see the epidemiology of these two viruses, the SARS-CoV virus and the MERS-CoV virus, or the coronavirus, They have sequence homology to the extent of 79% in SARS coronavirus and 50% in the MERS coronavirus. So the sequence homology to the current COVID-19 is to the extent of 80% and to the extent of 50% in already these two described disease entities. So if you look at the infectivity, the detection stage and the antibody formation as part of a natural history of the virus, as the COVID-19 virus enters our body, how the virus behaves. So if you look at the time from the entry, so from day 0 to day 4, it is the most infected period. And this is the time when coronavirus spreads from one person to the other. If social distancing and proper PPEs are not adhered to. And then the positivity remains right from day 0 to usually day 14 to even day 20. That is why you have the average quarantine period of 14 days. But there are people who don't clear the virus even after 14 days. And as per guidelines, initially, in the initial phases, we were waiting for 2 negative results before we used to take out the people from the isolation wards. 2 consecutive negativities only will bring the patient out of isolation. And since this is a viral infection, there is always a seroconversion. And the seroconversion is like any other virus. First, you will have an IgM rise, and after that, the IgM will wean off, and the IgG will appear and will remain for quite some time. And this is what is called as seroconversion, and this is what is called as the epidemiological study of the infectivity of the virus in the community. So if you want to research on the community spread of this disease, those who haven't been checked, now the government is resorting to this antibody testing in a large number of people. And this is also going to indicate the herd immunity of the Indian population as to how immune the Indian population in general have become to the COVID-19 virus. So these are very important graphs, and this can give you an indication as to this particularly as to how the IgM decreases and the IgG rises after you have had a COVID-19 infection. So if you look at the virus structurally, this is a beautiful, colorful diagram of the virus, colored in red, blue, green, and things like that in yellow. And this is the structure that you see, the cross-section of a virus. So this virus has various types of proteins, which are nothing but antigens. So the first is the enveloped small membrane protein. You can see it here. This is the enveloped small membrane protein, followed by the spike glycoprotein, which is marked as S. So this is the S antigen. Nucleocapsid protein, which is N, which is here. This is the nucleocapsid. Membrane protein, which is M. This is here. This is the membrane protein. This is marked yellow in color. Hemagglutinin esterase, which is HE, which is here. This blue thing. And the genomic single-stranded RNA is all around here, which is better seen here. So this is all around this is a single-stranded RNA genome that is seen. So this is the structure of the SARS-CoV virus 2. And why it is important to understand this? We are targeting the detection of the virus in terms of finding these antigens. So the gene targets that you are looking for in SARS-CoV virus 2 or the COVID-19 is the RDRP gene, the S gene. The RDRP gene is nothing but the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. So this is located here. The S gene is located here. This is the virus binding and entering protein. Then the E is the envelope gene, which is here. And the N is the nucleocapsid gene, which is present here. So usually in most kits, you are looking for these four things, either of these four things. And then you have the ORF1AB and the ORF1B non-structural protein. So these are the various proteins or the various sequences on the SARS-CoV virus 2 or COVID-19 genes, which are targetable for detection. We'll come to that subsequently. So if you get into the insight of what is the exact diagnosis of this virus, you know that this is a human respiratory virus, and the sample has to be from the nasopharynx or from oropharynx. And the nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs are being used for detection. The nucleic acid extraction is important, and most of the samples undergo nucleic acid extraction process, which is the most important step in the diagnostic assay. The performance of the assay will depend solely on the amount and quality and the quantity of the sample RNA. So this is extremely critical. Hence, RNA extraction should be done either meticulously through manual technique or through a good quality, fully automated nucleic acid extraction platform. And in the test process or assay, positive controls and negative controls are used along with the sample to know the validity of the assay process. And negative controls are usually RNase-free water, which is also called the non-template control. So what are the samples that are usually tested for the COVID-19 virus? Nasal and pharyngeal swab specimens, which has got a positivity rate ranging from, this is one letter is missing, approximately 38 to 67% in this publication. This is a publication from China, 2020, in the European Journal of Clinical Microbiology and Infectious Disease. Sputum is around 50%. Bronchoalveolar lavage fluid is nearly 100%. But this is an invasive procedure, so not many people do it as a sampling technique. But what is usually done is nasopharyngeal and sputum is again difficult to take out because mostly you get saliva, so not an ideal sample. Bronchial aspirate is again invasive, not easily followed. Blood has got very little positivity rate, so it is not the ideal sample. Stool or the anal swab is another people have attempted. It has got about 20% positivity rate. Urine has none, it is about 1% positivity rate. So the ideal sample and the doable sample is nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal swab in patients where the positivity rate is approximately 38% to 67%. So this is swab. I will not go into the exact process, but all that you know that you have to use swabs. And these swabs are available along with the viral transport medium or VTM. So what are these swabs? The swabs are of many types. You have the calcium alginate swab or the swabs with wooden shafts. These are not to be used because it is possible that they may contain substances that inactivate some of these viruses and inhibit PCR testing. So not the ideal. What is ideal is the synthetic fiber swab with plastic or wire shafts, which is used for sampling. Either nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal swab can be collected. Nasopharyngeal has a higher sensitivity than oropharyngeal swab, but both are acceptable. But what we recommend in our hospital and in most hospitals, both nasopharyngeal and oropharyngeal swabs have to be collected, and they should be combined in a single VTM tube to maximize the test sensitivity and limit the use of testing resources so that you don't have to repeat. So one swab from nasopharynx, one swab from oropharynx, and both swabs go into the single VTM tube for transportation to the testing lab or in-house for testing. So the molecular detection methods usually in this virus do not require replication competent viruses. Hence, culture facility is not required, but preservation of nucleic acid is essential. So the nucleic acid is preserved in the viral transport medium, and the swabs that are collected should immediately be placed into a sterile transport tube containing the fluid that I have spoken about, the transport medium. And usually there are about 2 to 3 ml of fluid in the transport medium tube. You can have AMIS transport medium, or even when you do not have this, you can even quickly put it into a sterile saline and immediately transport under a cold chain to the laboratory which is testing. So ideal is this VTM. The ICMR has recommended about 5 to 6 VTM vendors who can sell these VTMs to different laboratories. One of the Indian companies is High Media. You have it from BD. You have it from many other companies. Specimen handling. After collection of the swabs, the specimen should be stored between 2 to 25 degrees and processed within 48 hours. And if delivery and processing exceeds 48 hours, specimens should be transported in dry ice or in cool packs, and once in the laboratory should be frozen at -70 to -80 degrees deep freezing. So ideally speaking, it should be immediately collected and transported or performed in-house in the same hospital laboratory. The extracted nucleic acid, which is nothing but RNA, should be stored at least -20 degrees or lower. Usually RNAs are stored at -80 degrees. So for long-term storage and long-term archival, -80 degree is the ideal. So nucleic acid extraction is the next important step after the swab collection and swab dispatch. So RNA extraction is the methodology, and you have different types of RNA extraction that I'm going to discuss in the next slide. So RNA extraction is nothing but the purification of RNA from biological samples. And this procedure is complicated by the ubiquitous presence of RNases in cells and tissues and in glassware and in plasticware. So your glassware and plasticware has to be RNA free. And you should use reagents which are RNase free, so that the RNA that you have extracted should not degrade immediately following the extraction. So you have to see that you use plasticware and glassware that are ribonuclease enzyme free, and their cells and tissues should be RNase free. So they should be immediately lysed so that they do not have this enzyme, and otherwise the sample can rapidly degrade. So what are the types of RNA extraction? These days you have large number of automated platforms, but you can still do manual extraction by using kits which are either silica technology based tubes, guanidinium acid phenol extraction, which is the age-old technique, but no one does this now because it is highly cumbersome. What is used is this, second one, third one, and the fourth one. Fourth one has become very popular. This is the magnetic bead-based technology, which is compatible to automation as well. You can do it manually and by automation. Density gradient centrifugation using cesium chloride or cesium trifluoroacetate. This is also used. You have various kits which uses this small columns, spin columns, which can extract the RNA. So this is just to show you a schematic diagram as to how RNA extraction is done by magnetic bead method. So to this solution, to the sample in the VTM, add magnetic beads. Then the magnetic beads will have specific binding. Then you will remove the supernatant after centrifugation, then wash and elution. You see, this is very simple to see, but actually when you do it, it takes about a batch of 50 to 60 samples, around 2 hours to extract manually. So if you enumerate the methods of COVID-19 detection, first will come as virus culture. Virus culture is restricted mostly to research laboratories. It is not meant for diagnostic labs. Centers like National Institute of Virology and the National Center for Disease Control in Delhi, so they may be using this culture methods. But otherwise, the standard method is the real-time PCR or nucleic acid detection. You can also detect the viral antigens, which is quite cumbersome, not usually followed, because this will be based on an antigen-antibody reaction. Just like you have other antigen detection like HBsAg, like HIVs and all these antigen detections the way you do. But what we would be interested in, the standard method, which is the real-time PCR. Some people may call it reverse transcriptase PCR. So when you call it reverse transcriptase PCR, it is a qualitative nomenclature. But when you talk about real-time PCR, it is a quantitative technique. So tests for antibodies produced against the viral antigens also can be done, which is usually done on the current setting of clinical epidemiological studies in the community, and where there is high clinical suspicion, the infection has passed out for quite a number of days, and if RT-PCR is negative, you can do an antibody assay to know that the patient had COVID-19 viral infection. So when we talk about the real-time PCR tests, which are based on the detection of the genes that are present on the virus, either on the membrane or protruding out of the membrane or inside the nucleic acid, you target these genes. As I have mentioned, RDRP is a very common gene that is looked for. That is the RNA-dependent RNA polymerase. The N gene, this is the nucleocapsid gene, the S gene, and the E gene. E gene is the envelope gene. E gene is usually positive in most patients. And this E gene has got great sequence homology to other respiratory viruses. So E gene positivity alone will not make a diagnosis of SARS-CoV-2 infection. I'll come to this particular aspect a little later. And as I have mentioned in my previous slide, that it is right from 38% to 67% in the Wong's article, but usually the sensitivity of the real-time PCR for detection of SARS-CoV-2 is 30 to 60% positivity. And the RT-PCR targeting the RDRP gene has the highest analytical sensitivity amongst all these 4 genes. It's the same publication, which they published quite early because they were the ones who got the infection quite early, so this is their publication. If you look at the features that is required to be present in a diagnostic kit, you have to analyze them into multiple factors. So the feature that is important is that the kit should have a good sensitivity, should have a good specificity. So this will give you false negative, and this will give you false positive. So it should have less false positive, it should have less false negative. So sensitivity and specificity are 2 important features of any kit. And as you know that the storage temperature of most kits are around -20 degrees. Kits do have internal controls which are extremely important. Some of the internal controls are endogenous and some are exogenous. I have dedicated one slide subsequently to this control thing, which we'll discuss later. And any good kit should have a very good limit of detection. Limit of detection is to what lower level of viral antigens the assay can detect. So LOD is extremely important. And this LOD is also indirectly correlates to the CT value when you look at the real-time platform. CT stands for cycle time. I'll come to that later. So lower the cycle time, greater is the quantity of virus present. Higher the CT value beyond the threshold, lower is the quantity of the virus. So kits that are available or assays that are available till 19th of March, when I was preparing the slide, out of 71 kits assessed by the ICMR Validation Center, 28 kits were found to be satisfactory from all angles, from the sensitivity, specificity point of view, and the degree of LOD, and the CT values that we get based on the number of viral particles. So we have used in our laboratory these three kits: Altona Diagnostics, RealStar SARS-CoV-2 RT-PCR kit version 1.0. They are soon going to have a version 2.0. 3B BlackBio Biotech India Limited is another Indian kit, known as the TruePCR SARS-CoV-2 RT-qPCR kit. This is also a version 1.0. They are going to soon have, I think within a week's time, version 2.0, which is a single tube assay. Currently, this particular kit is a 2-tube assay. So soon they're going to launch the single tube assay. MyLab Discovery Solutions, which is a Pune-based company, it generated a lot of media attention because they were the first lab in the country to have manufactured this PathoDetect COVID-19 detection kit. This is a 3-tube kit. And by 1 tube, 2 tube, 3 tube, I mean that the number of tubes that you need to handle to set up the PCR assay. So if this is time X, this is 2X, this is 3X. So to set up an assay, my lab requires 3 times the time than what a Altona kit takes, and the 3B BlackBio is the intermediate between Altona and my lab. This is the comparison between the 3 kits that we have used. Kit name already I have mentioned. The genes that tests in this assay is Altona kit detects the E gene and the S gene, and it has got an internal control. And this internal control is an exogenous control, not an endogenous control. I'll come to that later. The 3B BlackBio Biotech looks for E gene, the RDRP or the nucleocapsid gene, and the internal control, which is endogenous, which is the ribonuclease P, which is present inside the sample. Similarly, MyLab Discovery Solutions kit also looks for the E gene, the RDRP, and the RNase P. So technically, the genes involved are the same as TruePCR and MyLab Discovery, but in the Altona kit, it is a little different. It detects the envelope gene and the S gene with a exogenous internal control. The instrument compatibility is extremely important. You are not expected to have large number of equipments of the real-time platforms. Fortunately, in our center, we have almost 5 different types of real-time PCR machine. We have Rotogen Q, which can do a 72-tube assay in one go. We have the ABI 7500, which can do a 96-well plate. We do have a ABI QuantStudio 3. We do have a ABI QuantStudio 7. And we do have a Step 1 Plus, also of ABI. So we have 5 machines, and we have recently ordered for the QuantStudio 6. So soon we are going to have 6 real-time platforms in our laboratory. The main thing is that you must know what are the different fluorophores that are present in these kits, so that your equipment compatibility is there. Something which can be done on a Rotogene may not be compatible to ABA 7500 or Step 1 Plus or QuantStudio 3. Like 3B BlackBio is compatible to QuantStudio 3. It's compatible to Rotogene, but not compatible to ABA 7500. So you have to look into that. The reaction tubes, as I have already mentioned, single tube, 2 tube, 3 tube. So time consumption to put up the assay or set up the assay is equally exponentially increases. Reaction volume is nearly the same, 20 microliter, 20 microliter, 15 microliter. This is the master mix volume. And then the input viral RNA or the template RNA is 10 microliters in Altona, 5 microliters in 3B BlackBio and MyLab. So final volume is 30 microliters, 25 microliters, and 20 microliters. So when you run the things in the different qPCR machines, you have to see how much volume the well has or the tube has. So accordingly, you will use the platform. Testing time is different. For Altona, it is 2 hours 20 minutes on the Rotogene, and it is 1 hour 30 minutes and 1 hour 30 minutes in the ABA 7500 and QuantStudio 3. The positive result is usually determined by the presence or absence of these genes. So a test is considered as positive in Altona when both E gene and S gene are positive. E gene is envelope gene. It usually is positive in most SARS group of viruses. It has sequence homology to most of the respiratory viruses. So the non-specificity of this is little high. So E gene alone being positive is not a determinant for the COVID-19 detection until unless both S and E gene is positive. You must be reading in the newspaper that there are centers which has very high inconclusive results. Our inconclusivity is in about 3,200 assays is about 3.5 to 4%. That means in 100 reactions, we have about 4 which is interpreted as inconclusive. So inconclusive result is when you have internal control which is not amplified. You have E gene positive but S gene negative. So this is inconclusive. Similarly, when you have internal control RNSP, which is the endogenous control which is not amplified, that means the sample stability is not good. Or you have either RDRP or nucleocapsid gene or the E gene being negative. So these are the ways how you can say that if the result is inconclusive. Either you repeat the sample from the same BTM, or you ask for a repeat sample based on your institutional protocol. So this is a technical overview of kits in a larger sense. I compared in the previous table 3 kits, but here it has different kits. Right? It has included Thermo, SD Biosensor, and the Seegene. Seegene is a Korean kit. Thermo is an American kit. Target genes are nearly the same. Specificity is, everybody claims that it is nearly 100% sensitive and specific, that the ICMR or the NIV should answer better. But whatever they have mentioned in their evaluation chart are these. And the LOD copies are mentioned either as less than 10 copies, so quite good. PCR tube, you see, these are all single tube assays. MyLab is 3 tube, 3B BlackBio 2 tube, and Thermo is 1 tube. So 1 tube assay is always superior in the sense that you require less time, less manpower to set up the PCR. And soon this 3V BlackBio should be having a single tube assay. Number of tests per kit is immaterial. Depending on what you need, you can get 96 assay kit. Altona has had 96 assay, but now I have switched over to 384 assays, and you can have 48, 96. So predominantly you have 96 test well assays because 96 is the single plate, PCR plate which has 96 wells. The turnaround time on the machine is from 1.5 hours to 3 hours. So depending on the platform that you have, this will vary. Storage is all in minus 20 degrees or less. Ideally, RNA should be stored at minus 80, but minimum minus 20. So you have to have this infrastructure to store. The last row is blank. I had put the cost here, but then I removed it because the costs vary. And it is varying from distributor to distributor, from kit to kit, and so I just cut it off. So principle of the assay remains the same for any real-time PCR. So most of you who must be listening now must be doing real-time PCRs for HBsAg, for HCV, for HIV, for cytomegalovirus, for many of the respiratory viruses. So principle remains the same, and in fact this principle remains the same even for oncology molecular diagnostics. So basically it is RNA extraction, cDNA conversion, cDNA will be put it to the platform, then you will run it with the probe primers, and then you will put a threshold, and above the threshold at what level the cDNA amplifies. If more the virus, less will be the cycle time, and less the virus, more will be the cycle time. So that is the principle which is quite common and basic to all real-time PCR assays. So I am skipping this to save some time. In case you have any questions related to this slide, we can always come back. So this is a table of ICMR. The 28 kits that they recommend. So we use 3 of these which figure in this 28, and there are many other kits that are available. Why I have mentioned this is that sometimes the availability of kits have become a problem. So if you just use one and put all your confidence on that, it may not be true because you may not get that kit. So we have 3 different types of kits, so that at least if one is not available, the other one is available. That is how you run the laboratory. Now coming to the controls. This is one of the most important of the assay requirements. If the kit has got an endogenous control, that is much superior to a kit which has got an exogenous control. The endogenous control will tell you about the sample stability. The exogenous control cannot tell you about that. The exogenous control can say that your PCR assay setup is fine. The endogenous control will say that the sample that you used initially to extract the RNA was not possibly the right sample because the sample was inadequate in terms of the quality of collection of the nasopharyngeal swab and the oropharyngeal swab. So exogenous control is a control that is spiked in the sample. For example, a DNA with a known quantity of concentration or sequences added to the sample as control. So this you are adding externally, so it is exogenous. Endogenous control is you are adding at the time of extraction, the control that is present in the sample. For example, the actin RNA is present in all cells in an RNA sample. So this control uses a DNA which is a component of your sample, cDNA. So this is commonly referred to as housekeeping gene. So housekeeping genes is present in all cells. So if your sample collection is good, it is expected that the assay will be good. So this sort of control is mostly used in real-time PCR to normalize for different types of cDNAs. as the loading amounts. So endogenous control is better than exogenous control. Probe, as I mentioned, that kits are compatible to different platforms where the probes are important. So usually you use Tachman probes, you use Cybergreen probes. So you have different types of probes which go with your machine. So which has got a dye and a quencher. So this dye quencher combination has to be compatible to the real-time platform that you have in your lab. If the dye quencher combination is not compatible to your machine, you cannot buy that kit. So you must pay due attention to this fact that the dye quencher combination, the fluorophores that are attached to these are compatible to your real-time platform. Many times people don't have the appropriate platform, have bought kits which cannot be run in that platform, so they have returned. So this knowledge is extremely important. So what is CT value? Everybody may ask. CT stands for cycle time. So it is a value. So this green line, this horizontal green line is the threshold. Anything beyond that is supposed to be having some concentration of the virus. So if it is a very high concentration, it will be somewhere here. If it is in very low concentration, it will be somewhere here. And as per standard practice, any CT value which is more than 40 cycles is usually considered as negative. So the CT value of the threshold cycle is the cycle number at which the fluorescent signal of the reaction crosses the threshold. So this is the threshold. Okay. So if it is negative, it will be somewhere like this. It will all be below the threshold. Or if it is just above the threshold and not going beyond like something like this yellow curve, it is borderline. So it may not be strongly positive. So the CT value is inversely related to the starting amount of our target DNA, means the target cDNA or RNA for the virus. And I have discussed something like limit of detection as part of the kit functioning parameter. A good kit should have a very low limit of detection. The lower it is more sensitive. So LOD studies determine the lowest detectable concentrations, and usually the product insert should certify with a traceability that this kit has got a limit of detection to this extent. It will detect up to 10 copies of the coronavirus 19. Below that, it is undetectable. So the limit of detection is 10 copies. So that is at 95% confidence interval. Okay. So 95% of the time, even 11 copies of this virus will get detected by this assay. That's the limit of detection importance. I have completed nearly the detection of the antigens. So little bit of detection about viral antibodies. As you know, there is an acute phase when the infection is, the virus is still inside, and there is a convalescent phase immediately following the acute phase, which can be tested by different techniques. You have immunochromatographic tests, which are strip tests. You have enzyme-linked immunosorbent assays, ELISA tests. You have chemiluminescence assays, which are also little modification of the ELISA tests, and it detects the presence or absence of IgM, IgG. Either IgM is present or IgG is present or both are present, depending on the phase of acuteness and convalescence. So the ICMR has recommended rapid antibody tests also, and they are usually done from serum, plasma, or blood, but they are not diagnostic, not recommended for diagnosis. Tests may come positive after 7 to 10 days of infection. Positive test indicates exposure to the virus. Negative test does not rule out COVID-19 infection. So it is not recommended for diagnostic tests, but recommended for epidemiological assays and tests. These are the different kits that are recommended by ICMR for antibody detection. So I have finished in brief, a little glimpse of what the COVID-19 detection assays and the antibody detection assays. And now I think we can go into the question answer session. I have taken almost 45 minutes. So we have 15-20 minutes for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for addressing us in such a wonderful manner. I have collected some questions which I have received through mail. So you have almost covered everything, but still some questions are there. I will just put forward it for your discussion.
Surely.
Sir, first question is for sample storage. So some kits like Bodytech is saying it's lyophilized. We don't have to store it at -20°C. So what you have to say about this kit, sir?
You see, sample storage is the storage of the VTM, because the oropharyngeal and the nasopharyngeal swabs have to be stored. That is sample storage. And this storage, as I mentioned, that if it is your own in-house lab, you don't need to store it. But if you are receiving samples from other laboratories, from other hospitals, they need to store it or they need to transport it. So the storage is usually at -20 or less, and transportation has to be under cold chain before it reaches the hospital or the laboratory it tests. So the next question is about lyophilized kits. Some of the kits that are available are in freeze-dried condition. So when it is freeze-dried, it is called lyophilized. Then you have to reconstitute it. And after you have reconstituted, the reconstitution shelf-life applies. So moment you reconstitute the lyophilized vial, so you have to use it within 2 weeks. And you have to store it at -20 or less. And that is the lyophilized kit. The only advantage of lyophilized kit is that when you are transporting it from place A to place B, the kit, you do not have to maintain the cold chain. You can transport it at room temperature, and then the hospital can handle it, or the lab can handle it.
So then it means it can be a boon to country like India. It's hot and humid over here.
Because of the hot and humid country, where your courier system is not so robust, and the dispatch and delivery of items are not assured. So a lyophilized kit is certainly has got some advantage.
Right. So I will move to next question. On target genes, you have already discussed about target genes. But are all target genes are important for diagnosis, but there is some gene which is more important for proper diagnosis?
Oh, so that's what I told you. You see, every kit will have the envelope gene. And as I mentioned, the E gene has got tremendous sequence homology to the other SARS group of respiratory viruses. So just mere presence of E gene is not diagnostic of COVID-19. Until unless, along with the E gene, you have either the S gene or the N gene or the RDRP gene. RDRP has got the highest analytical sensitivity amongst all the genes that I have described, amongst S gene, N gene. So the maximum, like the ThermoKit looks for 3 genes, including the E gene. It has the RDRP and the N gene. So some of the kits, they look for along with E 1 more or along with E 2 more. So those kits claim that they have got higher sensitivity than the kits that look for only 2 genes or look for only 1 gene. So the target genes for diagnosis are important, and in what combination they are available in the diagnostic kit, you have to look for the product literature.
So then one question was from our attendees, Dr. Dharak. S gene protein, is it confirmatory and specific to COVID-2?
Pardon?
Sir, S gene protein, is it specific to COVID-2?
No, S gene, that's what I said. A kit may have S gene along with the E gene. So like Altona has E gene and S gene. But only E gene is not diagnostic of COVID-19 until unless S is positive.
So S is confirmatory, right, sir?
Yes, S is a confirmatory gene.
Okay.
S, N, RDRP, they are confirmatory targets.
Sir. And sir, number of tubes. As you have already said, single tube is more commercially viable. But does it also make any difference to the diagnosis?
I didn't go into the details of multiplexing. A single tube assay means it is multiplexed. In the same tube, you can detect multiple targets. So you will also detect E gene, you will also detect S gene, and also you will detect RDRP gene in a single tube. So that is multiplexed. And it is certainly better than a double tube or a triple tube technology. Double tube, you will have in one tube E gene, in the other tube you will have S gene or RDRP gene. So two tubes you have to put up in the assay. So instead of 96 assays in one run, you'll only do 48 assays because each sample will be two wells. You understand? So your time also is a factor which is equally important. You know, if somebody who uses the MyLab kit will use 3 times the time, it is extremely difficult. When a lab will be able to function and do 100 tests, you'll be 1/3 the tests in MyLab. Or in place of 300 tests, you are just 100 tests in MyLab because 3 times you have to handle the tubes. So that many number of more pipettings. So pipetting errors because you do not have completely automated liquid handling platforms. So every sample dispensing is pipetting, manual pipetting.
Okay.
So just think about 3 times more manual pipetting. So
right.
There will be an element of pipetting error when technologies is doing the assay. So instead of putting it in well X, A, he will put it in well B. Because it is such a repetitive, monotonous job. There is bound to be some errors.
Very
somebody is doing it manually. Okay. Until unless you completely automate the liquid handling process.
So moving to next question, it's about probes, sir. So like few genes are having 4 fluorophores for 4 different 3 genes and 1 internal control, while some genes are using only 2 fluorophores. So how does it differ and what is the advantage of it?
So this I addressed it by what platform, what real-time platform you have. Whether the probes and the fluorophores that are being used in the kit is compatible to that. Whether your platform, your kit is Tachman based or your kit is CyberGreen based. So depending on the assay type, your fluorophores will differ. Okay. So if you have ABI, it is mostly Tachman. If you have Rotogene, you can do CyberGreen as well. So depending on the fluorophore and the dye quencher combination, you have to see whether your system compatibility is there. So if your system is not compatible, that assay kit cannot be run in that machine. Like we had the MyLab kit. So the MyLab kit was compatible to step 1 plus of API. Whereas the Altona kit is not compatible to step 1 plus because the fluorophores, the channels were not there in that particular real-time platform. So you have to look at these. So this is very important while selecting the kit. So you will select the kit based on the real-time platform that you have in your lab.
Okay, sir.
Like say CGen kit, for an example. If you see the product literature of CGen kit, the product literature says it is compatible only to the Bio-Rad platform, Bio-Rad real-time PCR. So when they started selling, all the CGN vendors came and told me that no, sir, you can run it in any platform. I said the product literature, which is available in the public domain, does not mention that it can be used with other platforms. Show me the letter from CGN, I will accept it. As of now, no distributor has come to me to say and give me a paper which says that other than the Bio-Rad platform, it is compatible to other platforms. But it is excellent kit. CGN, the entire South Korea used the CGN kit for their assay. So the kit is good, but only thing is that the platform was not available with us.
Right. Sir, somewhere I saw the requirement wavelengths should fall between yellow and green channel. And like CGN is having 4 fluorophores. 2 fall in green and yellow channel, while 2 fall in red and orange channel.
Sometimes, you see, basically there are layers inside the real-time platforms. The broader the wavelength, it will cover a larger color, yellow to green. So if it is very narrow range, then you will have to accept it. So it may not be compatible. The wavelength may not be compatible to the dye that is there in that kit. So you have to see at what wavelength the channels have to function.
Right, sir. Right, sir. And so then some questions were from audience, like Dr. P.K. Sosu asked, is there any guideline from ICMR for reporting a positive report? It has to be in 2 different brand kits, or 1 report is suffice?
Which one?
Sir, is there any guidelines from ICMR? Positive sample has to be repeated in 2 different brands?
No, it's not like that. So you see, the guidelines are dynamic. When ICMR started giving the guidelines, and what the current guideline is, it has changed almost 5-6 times. So it is not like that. So the way a inconclusive sample was handled 2 months back, it has changed now. The way positives were handled 2 months before, and the way it is handled previously, it was told that you have to archive the positive sample for 7 days, and randomly 10% of the samples you have to send it to the reference lab. Like in Calcutta, you have the NICET, National Institute of Cholera and Enteric Disease. So like that, there are reference laboratories, but that have all changed. If it is positive as per the criteria laid down, you can hold on to the sample to your institutional SOP, but negative samples can be discarded after 7 days of archiving.
Right, sir. And sir, is the government recommending pooling of samples?
Pooling of samples can be done, and if the frequency of detection in your laboratory has been to the extent of less than 2%, you can pool the samples. That means low risk samples.
Okay,
but
sir.
if you are getting all high risk samples, like in our lab, the positivity rate is almost 8%. So we cannot pool because our positivity rate is so high. If we start pulling them, then almost every second pulled tube we have to do individually. Then it is going to be more time consuming and resource intensive. So pooling is done provided your frequency of positivity in your cohort of samples that you have received in a given time should be around 2%.
Okay, sir. And so, yes, sir. Yeah, please continue, sir.
So that's what I said. If you have got low risk samples, you can always pool.
Right, sir.
Say some hospital is sending us samples which are pre-surgical samples, pre-delivery samples, the pre-antenatal samples. So you expect that they are less likely to be positive. So in those samples, you can pool.
Right, sir. Very true, sir. And sir, nowadays many reports are coming as intermediate. All positives are all not positive, all negatives are negative. So what is this intermediate thing, sir?
Nothing like intermediate. Either it is low positive or high positive, or it is inconclusive. You see, that's what I mentioned, that when you do a real-time PCR, you have a threshold. Above the threshold is positive.
Okay.
So if the cycle time is just above the threshold, that means you have got very less number of copies of virus, but it has crossed this threshold. So you will say that it is very low positive, but low positive. And you can mention within bracket the cycle time. Say you get something at 35 cycles.
Right.
The defect center is almost at the roof. So less likely to be strongly positive, it is low positive.
Low
But
positive.
if you get something like 20 cycles or 18, 19 cycles, so it is strongly positive. The earlier it shows up, more strongly it is positive. And the later it shows up, it is low positive. It's nothing like intermediate. I mean, somebody is asking about inconclusive results.
Right.
Where you have not made a decision whether it is negative or positive.
Okay, sir. And sir, one last question is how to calculate RNA load, and is it advisable for the extraction and for the reporting?
You see, the thing is that it is just like you are checking for HIV viral load, you are checking for LBSAT load, you are checking for cytomegalovirus load. Here we are not checking the quantitative assays, though the performance of the assay is in the quantitative RT-PCR assays, but still it is not completely quantitative, that you can say that per microliter of the VTM you have so many number of copies, something like that. So it is just a binary result, which is the yes or no, positive, negative. You see, from a nasopharyngeal swab or from a pharyngeal swab, it is very difficult to say that you are, but from blood, had it been blood, you could quantify it. Per microliter of plasma or serum, you have this much quantity of RNA. So it is not a quantitative assay. It is a qualitative assay performed in the quantitative platform. Okay.
Okay, sir. Sir, here we are done with most of the questions. And sir, thank you so much for addressing us in such a wonderful manner.
My pleasure, and I also enjoyed it. Yes. And you see, my area is hematology. Since I am the director of the laboratory services, I am supervising the COVID lab. And during the process, I have learned myself about all these nuances of viral PCR and other things. Since molecular genetics, the basic concept are the same, whether you apply it to virology or hematology or to oncology, the principles remain the same. Because of that, I have been able to take this talk and hope I have been able to do justice. And this is out of my last 3 months experience of doing the COVID assay in our laboratory. Otherwise, my lab is a purely oncology hematology lab.
Okay, sir. And so I'm sure that everyone here attending the webinar would agree that our knowledge has improved by several notches. And now we are more clear about how to go about selecting a kit and what features to look in a kit. And so, thank you attendees for taking out your valuable time for attending this webinar. And thank you, sir, again for such a wonderful.
So how many people attended it as per the registration?
Sir, exact IT team will give us the exact figure, sir.
Okay. And out of my curiosity, I just wanted to know, today being a national holiday for Eid, I just wanted to know how many people have logged in.
So I will forward it to you as soon as I find it.
Thank you, Ankur, for organizing
this. Sir, we are honored to have you here, sir.
Yes. And give my special thanks to Dr. Gautam and Mr. Gautam.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
To you, to Avik Ray, and to all your team. Okay.
Right, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Namaste. Bye.
Can I switch off now? Log off?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.